emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 673.LK1218, certificate number 48481, Jobbers Canyon.
You and Mindy eat well. We talk about your food life on this show a lot, don't we?
Food life?
Yeah, you and Mindy live in the food life.
We're very busy, so we have a lot of takeout life lately.
Is that right?
A lot of taco life, but she does like to cook. So,
do you put frozen meals in your refrigerator by any chance?
Only for our vegetarian kid who will usually not eat what we are eating.
But you don't. When you go to the store, you don't go down the frozen aisle and put a couple of Stouffer's lasagnas in there.
No, I come from a family that would occasionally do that with Costco lasagna. We always thought that was fun when we were kids to put it in those little budget gourmet trays. Do you remember these? You have to slit the hole, you put it in the microwave, and in a hot pocket after school. Budget gourmet if mom or dad are out. But honestly, except for a few Trader Joe's select items that we know that the kid will not complain about, because it's bad to be a vegetarian and a picky eater. There's really not a lot of options if you're vegetarian, but also you don't like mushrooms, half the grains, much soy. Hard to feed. Do you eat a lot of frozen food?
I do.
Do you mean popsicles? How many Otter Pops have you had today?
I have had 0 Otter Pops, but there are some vegetarian, not vegetarian, but like natural fruit style Otter Pops upstairs.
We have some of those, the juice ones where you feel like a better parent.
But yeah, that's exactly right. But I do eat frozen foods, and I got into the habit of doing it by going to Trader Joe's, America's most beloved frozen food purveyor.
Once you know which ones are good, you can eat right at Trader Joe's.
Yeah. So I'm as a bachelor who does not sit down at the table every night with my family and to a lovingly home cooked meal.
A patriarchal society where someone has just cooked you. I honestly feel guilty because Mindy will, if Mindy's making dinner, she will make like 4 things, 5 things, and I'll be like, what? Wait, why do we have cauliflower? But also you pickled some kind of cucumber. And what's this? This is couscous?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like 5 dinners.
No, it's
bad. It's bad.
I throw some old I like some takeout rice into a bowl, and then I put over the top of it a Trader Joe's like tikka masala in a bag. And
is that your go-to Trader Joe's thing?
And I don't even eat in front of the television because I don't even have a TV. So I just sit and stare out the window eating my sad
look at
little
your phone.
No. I sit in the bath. I actually eat most of my meals in the bath.
Do you remember when Trader Joe's had like the racist alter egos?
Sure. Like
if you
Trader's
got, if
Jose.
You got the Italian food, it would be Trader Gianni, and they would have Trader Chang's for their
That was
Chinese
not that
entries.
long ago.
It was weirdly recently.
It's like 3 years ago, maybe even more recently. But I do eat, and the problem is I'm enough of a hippie or a modern eater that I'm very aware that probably any Purdue chicken is 1/3 antibiotics.
Yeah, that's the. I mean, that's the
Animals.
most. That's the most it can be because the FDA looks out for us.
Yeah. Any more than 1/3, and
You can't get a 2/3 antibiotic.
you have
chicken.
to sell it overseas. But all meat processing is probably bad. There's almost no version of it unless the farmer actually comes to your house and kills the cow on your front steps after kneeling with it in prayer. Every other version of it is going to be a harsh toke.
I would pay extra for that.
But and you'll pay extra if you ask for all that service. It's twice as expensive for them to kill and process the cow right on your front.
I mean, we don't do
porch.
this with meat, although we probably should because meat is murder. But we do get a box of organic groceries left on our porch every week, and it just reminds me that I should feel guilty about the other ones. If I don't get a rutabaga from Full Moon Farms or whatever.
Oh, think about what that normal rutabaga goes through.
Oh man.
The torture.
And think about what it's done to the soil, probably.
Oh, that rutabaga off-gassing.
Water that's not going to thirsty children because it's going to the Central Valley to give me a rutabaga.
Yeah, and what the water is like after it passes through the rutabaga.
Exactly.
You can't clean that water, no matter how you try.
No, your kids are just they have rutabaga DNA in them now.
But America and American food, people in Europe and other nations of the world
drinking milk out of a box, they sneer at us.
They do. They feel like we are too lackadaisical in the way we process our food, although they're wrong. They're also getting terrible food. They just are better. Their companies are better at pretending.
I was at dinner with my in-laws the other night, and they had just come back from Europe, and I think Mindy's dad had made pancakes, so we were having pancakes for dinner, nothing better. And I said, "Oh, is there butter?" And he was like, "Yeah, because they're kind of a margarine family."
"Oh,
is there butter?" Yes, he hands me the butter, and I was like, "Oh, good." And he's like, "But it's not Danish butter or Dutch butter."
Whoa,
and I was
Dutch
like,
butter.
"Are those good?" And he's like, "Oh, it's night and day.
That stuff is so good.
You'll never go back
that
once you
Danish butter."
So maybe they are better over there.
What kind of butter was it?
I don't know. It was Kroger butter.
Yeah.
It was store brand butter.
Local butter.
But I come from a Parquet childhood.
Yeah, but aren't we all Tillamook out here all the time? Don't you get Tillamook?
I get Tillamook cheeses.
But you don't get Tillamook
and
butter.
ice cream. They make butter?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Come on.
I've been getting
get your Oregon on.
That's going to be better than. That's the Denmark of America.
Oregon is 100% the Denmark of America.
It's true.
Although probably could put 5 Denmarks in Oregon, but Denmark's full of hicks too, just like Oregon is. Hicks and hippies.
Sure. Just because Legoland's nice, it doesn't mean there's not Trump stickers, 20 miles out of town. Who's the Danish Trump? Hans
Jürgen Jürgensen.
Fascism.
In the United States, I at one, maybe more than anything, I wish I had never red-pilled myself on processed food because if I could just be someone who thought processed food was amazing and didn't have to sit and torture myself with my ivory tower guilt over every single barbecue thing from ConAgra.
The body's so simple. It just wants sugar and salt and fat.
But
if they've invented new chemicals that make that sugar and salt and fat taste even more delectable.
It's maybe one of the big arguments against being a liberal is the amount of time I spend walking around a supermarket going, "Oh, I can't eat that. Oh God, I can't buy that."
I wish I didn't know the truth about fast food.
But then the truth is, if you don't want to eat this garbage, then you have to spend an hour and a half a day preparing your food. And another hour and a half, probably.
Or growing it yourself.
Go out in the garden and you have to shop and you have to eat better and exercise. And while you're at it,
drink some water, John.
Why not be honest with people in business? And
how many glasses of water have you had today? I bet not enough.
Let me think. Does coffee count as water?
Is coffee a vegetable? Is butter a carb?
I think I've had 1 glass of water today.
It's not enough. Coffee's a diuretic.
Yeah.
If you drink a cup of coffee, you got to have 3 glasses of water probably.
Oh, no.
I
already am in the bathroom 60 times a day.
That's the coffee.
Because I'm 453.
I may have already told this story, but I remember red pilling my kids about Big Ag. We were
Boo.
It wasn't me. Mindy took Dylan up to the Monroe County Fair, and he was watching the cows get milked and the hens get egged.
Oh,
and then they looked at the pigs, and he was like, "Where does the bacon come out?" And he thought that just like getting milk out of a cow and eggs out of a chicken,
the bacon
that the farmer could come
out
and every morning peel off some bacon from a happy pig. And we had to tell Dylan the sad Charlotte's Web truth.
But he sure seems to eat as much bacon as he can.
Even my vegetarian kid is like, wait, I can't eat bacon?
I know. Bacon's pretty good.
Just ask Reddit.
I really, the supermarkets are good at making tasty things. The companies, the big comps, as we say.
All three of them.
and
big comp.
So here are the top food consumer products companies in the Fortune 500.
I thought you were going to say the top food consumers.
Here are the
in
top
America,
food consumers in
listed
this room.
Order.
Me, followed by you.
Yeah, silver medal.
The number one is PepsiCo.
PepsiCo makes more food than any other.
That's the largest by revenue of all the food consumer product companies.
Is that because of other is that because of fast food stuff? Did they spin off all their Pizza Huts and KFCs, or like what is that? Or do they own other brands of meats and fruits and vegetables? Like if I walked down the supermarket aisle and I buy Nabisco, is that secretly Pepsi Nabisco? Pepsi Pepperidge Farms? Pepsi Del Monte?
Pepsi makes a lot of pop.
Well, I've heard.
They make Gatorade, but they also own Doritos, Cheetos.
Right.
They own the Quaker Food Company, Ruffles, and
so they make health food.
And Tostitos, Fritos, all of the Eatos. And they also sell the Starbucks family of products in grocery stores.
Pepsi, by the way, no longer owns KFC and Pizza Hut. They spun that off in, I don't know, the 90s.
But next on the list is Kraft. These are American processed food companies, but I'm sure that people listening internationally also are able to buy products made by Pepsi.
When
and
we
Kraft.
say Kraft, when we say Pepsi and Kraft, you hear Fanta and La Vache qui rit, and that's fine.
Third is General Mills, which I always assumed was the largest American food products company.
Because who can outrank a General?
That's right.
Nobody.
Well, and they used to make everything, but I think now if Pepsi can own Doritos, like, is there no God?
I think that should be a kind of a government antitrust problem. Doritos make you thirsty for more Pepsi.
Oh,
this is a vertical that they should
integration.
get out of. Honestly, the government needs to break up Big Chip.
Big Chip.
You shouldn't be allowed to make soda and the soda that quenches the chip thirst and the chip that inspires the Pepsi craving.
Why should you not? This is America, God, darn it, as we say.
Does Coke own food brands?
Surely they do.
It appears maybe not. I mean, lots of other beverages.
Oh, well, that's why they're not that big.
That's why they're not that big. They own, Minute Maid and Schweppes. They own every kind of drink. But if you have to chew, Coke's not for you. That's what they say in Atlanta.
Whoa, they don't. If you go down the list, one of the biggest food companies in the United States is Land O'Lakes, who make butter and spreads, but they also make like what appear to be government cheese, and they make like packaged jam and pudding. Like, how is a company that's just making sour cream, pudding, and cheese and sauce one of the largest companies in America, you might ask? Because
John Roderick is eating cheese and sauce all the time.
Wants cheese and sauce is why.
It's not as good as Dutch pudding cups, but I'm sure it's fine.
Delicious Dutch pudding cups. But if you don't have to go much further down the list before you arrive at ConAgra products. Are you familiar with the ConAgra family of food brands?
Yeah, but do you not see it on foods because they own the brand you see on the foods?
Well, you want to think that ConAgra is because it's such a large company.
It sounds like they're the evil company in like a Michael Clayton type of movie. You know, that
Right.
they get brought down by an enterprising reporter or whistleblower.
Yeah, and that's not entirely wrong.
ConAgra is, in fact, evil. Unless they sponsor this particular entry, in which case.
What's funny is
brownies.
that they are a company that owns a lot of brands, but they didn't start out that way. It was a thing that happened after many decades of kind of doing a good job of making flour and a bad job, Ken, of making business. Right now, when I think of like a food conglomerate, I think of these companies like General Mills that own a bunch of brands that you think of as major food brands, right? Here are some of the brands that comprise the ConAgra family of foods.
People always say family. Like what a heartwarming idea it is that we make both pudding and boxes of crackers.
It's a family. It's a family affair.
Yeah, the ConAgras came over to this country on the Mayflower.
Think about this family.
Okay.
Chef Boyardee.
He could be the patriarch of the family.
Chef Boyardee makes delicious canned raviolis.
They are not delicious, but go ahead.
Hebrew National hot dogs.
Hot dogs.
Bertolli, which is a Italian sort of pasta-based food company, right? Bertolli. What do they make?
Yeah, it was an olive oil brand, but now it's pastas and sauces and frozen dinners, all the rest.
So, you know, from Hebrew National, Chef Boyardee, and Bertolli, we see that the ConAgra family has a lot of ethnic. It's like a melting pot, an American melting pot.
It's a real American success story.
Here, there's Orville Redenbacher, famous American German.
Speaking of ethnic food, Orville Redenbacher.
Pam, the spray on.
Does that count as food?
Oil that you put on your
canola oil in aerosolized form.
I think it's food. You could, if you were starving in the desert and all you had was a can of Pam.
Oh man! And
you just sprayed Pam in your mouth. How long could you live? Do you think?
How big a thing is it? Do I have like a?
It's a full can of Pam, a full can of home style.
There can't be that many calories in Pam. I mean, even if that thing was full of canola oil, which it's not.
You're going to have digestive problems pretty fast. You might lose more water than you gain in nutrition. That's probably what
then when you have to fry something, it'll stick to the pan because you just squirted all your Pam into your mouth.
No. In this story, we have nonstick pans.
Do you know what Pam stands for?
What?
It's the inventor's name. It stands for Product of Arthur Meyerhoff.
Oh, how smart!
What an ego!
It's the product. He only made one thing.
I guess that's a guy who knew, like, this is my life's work. I will never invent anything better than canola oil in a spray bottle.
Another one of the big brands, Slim Jim.
Oh,
Slim Jim.
Step into a Slim Jim,
which is a kind of
it's beef jerky in some kind of casing.
Yeah, it's a beef jerky.
It's an oilier beef jerky. If you're ever eating beef jerky and think, I wish this were kind of oily.
Yeah. I wish this was for you. Super greasy. It wasn't a couple of years ago. This is a side note. There was a explosion at the Slim Jim plant. The Slim Jim plant blew up.
Is that how Randy Savage died?
That might have been. That doesn't really figure into the story, but when I was reading about this and saw that the Slim Jim plant had exploded, I celebrated its entire catalog. So as you can see, ConAgra is kind of a clearinghouse of a lot of different sort of unrelated foodstuffs.
Probably acquired in a series of acquisitions.
They make healthy choice lines of food.
Okay.
Ready Whip, fake like whipped cream.
Is Ready Whip just whipped cream that's been treated so it's shelf stable, or is it actually like Cool Whip in that it has no dairy and it's based on palm oil and some kind of? I think Ready Whip is actually a dairy whipped cream product. It just comes out of a cool. It just comes out of a cool nitrous oxide thing, so you can do whippets. Yeah,
there are a lot of different Ready Whips. Some of them are fat free.
Oh yeah, they have coconut and almond.
Yeah, they do. But I do believe that Ready Whip is made of,
yeah, it's dairy.
Is it?
Do you think we're making people hungry for Ready Whip just talking about it at length? If you're living in the bombed out ruins of America and you haven't seen a can of Ready Whip in months, I apologize.
It's funny because
good stuff.
Ready Whip was originally invented as a vegetable oil substitute for cream. So they must have.
Yes.
But then after World War II, they introduced real cream into the vibe. I know all about Ready Whip because it's pressurized with nitrous oxide. So I spent a lot of time integrating.
It's drug paraphernalia with a little
just a cream finish,
a little dairy on top.
And let's see, there are some other things: egg beaters, the fake eggs, and Udi's gluten free, which you always want to think is like
Udi's.
It's a brand of pasta and other products that have no gluten.
I don't go in that gluten free aisle,
and it makes you feel like, oh, this is made by some like Israeli grandmother who doesn't want you to eat any gluten, but in fact, it's made by ConAgra.
Well, maybe there originally was an Udi. There was originally a Chef Boyardee.
Sure, there was originally a Pam. Apparently.
Imagine if you're just like, you're on a plane or something and you see Chef Boyardee there. Like he's a real guy. He's got the hat.
Yeah.
The hat says Chef Boyardee.
Those pink little cheeks and that tiny little dolly mustache.
I mean, he died in 1985, so it would be difficult to see him on a plane today. If you do, it's a ghost.
Signore Boyardee?
Boyardee. It was originally just Ettore Boyardee, but it got Americanized.
Yeah, and like spelled with a weird, like here's how you spell it.
They don't have a double E in Italia.
Well, ConAgra has, like most American foodstuffs companies, a long history, and it is today's show is going to take us to America's heartland.
Yes,
no less a place than Omaha, Nebraska. Have you been to Omaha?
State I've never been to. We were, I think, on the addenda, we were recently saying we need a road trip to North Dakota and Nebraska, despite the fact that they do not border each other.
No, but they're close. They're separated only by that blowing and sucking state of South Dakota.
That will get rid of 2 of the 8 states I haven't been to. That would knock out a quarter of my problem.
Well, Nebraska is kind of a fascinating state. I'm a big Nebraska booster.
I enjoy the Bruce Springsteen record of the name.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it. The Bruce Dern movie of the name.
It's a hard watch.
People named Bruce have done good work with that state.
8 out of 10 men in Nebraska are named Bruce.
It's like Australia.
It's like a little known fact. Huh. That's right. All the women in Australia are named Sheila. All the men in Nebraska are named Bruce.
Did you know that Australian women are not in fact named Sheila? That it's just a slang term there?
What?
For women?
You're kidding me.
That would be like saying all American women are named Sweetie or something.
Are all women in England actual birds?
Yes. Yeah. They have light, hollow bones and can therefore flutter from thatched roof to vicarage.
You can tell from listening to this show that Ken and I both have COVID and have brain fog. This is the show from
this is
now
how
on.
you diagnose long COVID, is you make someone podcast for an hour and you see just what kind of organ damage they have.
It makes sense that Nebraska is the breadbasket of America because
it rhymes.
It rhymes.
Nedbaska.
But when the westward migration arrived there on the Great Plains, and the thing about migrating people everywhere is that a certain percentage of them is going to get tired every day.
You guys go on.
Right. And so the reason there are towns everywhere is that each town represents the number of people that got tired that day and said, I'm not going anymore.
Lewis and Clark and Zimmerman. And then Zimmerman's like, you know what? I'm just going to rest up here. These mountains are pretty rocky. I don't know what you guys are going to call them, but
Los Angeles is really big, which is testament to how many people kept going. But Denver,
you always know the name of the lazy guy who stayed behind. Oh, hey, Mr. Dubuque, I'm just going to stay here in Iowa. The Dubukes I'll be camping right here. It seems nice. Maybe the Paiute are friendly.
But we've talked a lot about the Mormon Trail and the Oregon Trail, the westward migrations of peoples across the plains, and a lot of those trails went through Nebraska. And kind of all joined up with one another in central Nebraska along the Great Platte River Road, the Oregon Trail, the Mormon Trail, all the trails,
all the good trails.
They all connected there, and then dispersed on the other side. They get to Wyoming and these people go that way, these people go that way.
And some people were like, that was a long walk. This looks pretty good.
Yeah, let's stay here. In what? Laramie. Why would anybody? To all of our Laramie listeners, I love it there. But,
To both of our Wyoming listeners,
you're
fully 2/3 of the population.
You have you have legitimate questions for your ancestors.
And
Why?
And land acknowledgement.
Oh,
All
yeah,
the
sure.
places they were staying, they didn't really, they weren't the first people there.
No, that's right. But even the first people there weren't the first people there until they got to the first people there.
They were Sven and Patrick come-latelys.
But because of Nebraska's location and because of its like centrality to the westward migration, maybe not coincidentally, it is where the Union Pacific Railroad, that's the route that they picked for the Transcontinental Railroad in the 1860s. Okay. when Lincoln kind of authorized the construction of the railroad across the states. They took it across Nebraska.
Do you think Lincoln was like, it should go through Lincoln, Nebraska? That's the bitchingest state capital.
It was like a Kansas-Nebraska Act thing. He was like, well, Kansas is going to get hovercrafts, so Nebraska is going to have to get the train.
Before people write to me, I know that Lincoln, Nebraska was not named that while in Lincoln's lifetime. Thank you for do not write me.
And all of the people who are writing me about the incredible hovercrafts of Kansas,
like Dorothy's house,
just address it to Ken.
I just landed on my witch in a hovercraft.
So Omaha became like a major hub for traffic headed west. It was on the Missouri River. It was right across from Council Bluffs, Iowa, and part of the Lewis and Clark experience. And it became the kind of storehouse, the supply depot for the westward migration. And also, then a collecting point for.
Sure, you need workers to run a supply depot.
That, and also all the meat packing, all of the. You
got to process the wheat you're growing.
That's right, the wheat and so forth.
Ranching.
And so Omaha was a town that was even maybe less than manufacturing. It was primarily like a warehouse town. It was a place that you could resupply, and the downtown of Omaha, although the headquarters of Union Pacific, was originally kind of built as a transfer hub.
Get stuff off of one train and onto another.
Right. So when ConAgra as a company began, it was originally called the Nebraska Consolidated Mills Company.
Does the con still stand for consolidated?
It does. It's Consolidated Agriculture.
That's what you want to do with agriculture.
ConAgra.
Consolidated.
So they weren't really making anything. They were just, they were bringing in shipments of grain and consolidating them there in silos. And then, they were a distributor.
Ready Whip wasn't even a gleam in their eye.
There wasn't even such a dream. Can you imagine?
There probably were future, philosophers on street corners who were like, one day this creamed milk will come in a metal tube propelled by the gas of laughter.
At the time,
and everyone was like, stone him.
Teenagers that couldn't get beer would go into convenience stores and they had to get high off of just like eating as many Ritz crackers as they could.
The whipped cream section just had there was a Cracker Barrel, and then the whipped cream section was just a series of rocks, and you would hit yourself on the head with a rock and hope it approximated the lightheadedness of doing whippets.
When ConAgra first conned into a business in 1919, downtown Omaha was already a city of warehouses, and
like a port, except it's in the middle. It's Omaha, somewhere in Middle America, as Counting Crows taught us.
And it really was a port because it was where the railroad and the river met. Those warehouses were built over the course of, from the time the railroad began. The Union Pacific started in Omaha until World War One. The warehouse district in Omaha was it's interesting to think about warehousing as an industry, kind of itself. Right?
I put things in a building, and then I know how to get them out of the building.
Right. We're going
without my buildings, you can't do it. I'm going to take a dime on every dollar.
We're going to build a town that is about filling up and emptying out.
And I assume there's maybe not yet, but at the time there's some science and efficiencies to that, right? You got to know how much space you need for certain kinds of things, how long they're going to be there, like valet parking a car, like last in, first out.
This was the dawn of refrigeration. It was...
ConAgra owns Birdseye, right?
Right.
There's your early days of refrigeration.
If you think about the original construction of the railroads, there wasn't anybody out there, right? I mean, the railroads to the west, there was a kind of manifest destiny justification for building them, but there wasn't yet.
You weren't bringing things to anyone.
No, and you weren't bringing things really back from anywhere either. And constructing the railroads was extremely expensive. And in fact, when the Union Pacific was first proposed, not very many investors rushed in to get rich on it because there wasn't a clear business case for building it.
Just like today with Elon Musk.
Well, and there was a lot of malfeasance around building it.
Just like today with Elon Musk.
There was the Union Pacific set up a fake bank and like absolutely robbed the U.S. government.
Yeah,
like
public dollars.
Basically, every dollar they spent on building the railroad, another dollar disappeared into their pockets because the government had a vested interest in it.
That's how you do it.
But by the 1880s, there was enough kind of there were goods and services moving around. Maybe not services moving, but there were a lot of goods. It was really surplus in California that first kind of introduced the idea of like, wait a minute, we're growing way more food out here than we can consume. What if we packed it up? What if we packed that fresh fruit up in refrigerated cars and sent it back east? And Omaha was the hub of it. And so you think about Detroit or Pittsburgh and those towns kind of falling on hard times, the factories shutting down. Those factories were built to make things. Omaha was built to move things. And over the course of about 40 years at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, downtown Omaha built in a very concentrated area, just like a 7x3 block area. There were 24 different giant warehouse buildings built to accommodate the tremendous sort of in and out of American commerce. That was like literally a kind of heart. Right? Stuff coming in one valve, stuff going out another.
Barrels full of salted fish coming out the other.
And this...
What are these... when you say warehouses, I'm picturing kind of modern day corrugated metal places where Batman swoops down out of the darkness at you. But I assume, like most public buildings back then, these were beautiful edifices.
This was 19th century Batman, which I
love 19th century Batman.
His lair was made out of red brick. The buildings were all kind of built during an era where Renaissance revival architecture was the rage.
Even for warehouses.
So a lot of them had turrets, and they were gorgeous buildings, mostly built out of red brick. They were 7 stories tall in most cases, between 6 and 8 stories tall.
Wow.
And they were built...
They're probably multiple stories, right? They're not just
6 or 7
they're
stories.
Not just big vaulted spaces. They're not big vaulted spaces with piled to the roof with crates.
No, this was... They had tall ceilings, and each floor... I mean, the floors were... Often a building was built by a single company, but then leased out in you could have an office and kind of any size or shape as you started a company, and could lease space to accommodate all your barrels of salted fish until you expanded into canned ravioli, and then you leased the building next door. And they were all compactly located because of their proximity to the Union Pacific yards and to the river. So they were right down kind of at the water's edge. And the buildings were tall enough and like substantial enough that the experience of being down in this district felt like it was described in multiple accounts as just feeling like you were in a canyon land, because the buildings were close enough to, the streets weren't super wide boulevards, you'd be down in there and feel like the buildings blotted out the sky.
The funny thing is today, Fifth Avenue or Park Avenue in Manhattan is described this way. But back then, there probably were very few blocks of Manhattan that actually had rows of buildings that tall canyoning around you. Omaha was probably the closest equivalent. If you're Spider-Man in 1910,
you can go down 7 blocks over 3.
You want to be in Omaha if you're 19th century Spider-Man.
If you imagine how impressive that would have been in 1890 or 1905.
I mean, in any great city of the world, much less
out in the middle
Omaha.
Of the plains,
Yeah.
Right? And so the neighborhood became known as Jobbers Canyon because the people that were doing that kind of work were known as jobbers, right? They were
like if you worked in a warehouse, you were a jobber.
Yeah, they were jacks of all trades. They were get things done types, thinking makes and making thinks, commercing. They were doing a lot of commercing.
Are these mostly manual labor? I assume most of these workers, or is a jobber also the clerk filling out the lading bills? I mean, I guess if you're a warehouse company, you need both. That's an information economy, kind of. But I think you mostly just need big, burly Swedish and Eastern European guys, right?
Yeah, a jobber is somebody that does. It's like a temp, like a working class temp, okay. Right? You've got guys standing around. And it's like I need you to tote that barge.
So here it would be
need you to lift that bale.
It'd be like a stevedore.
Yeah, except they're doing all kinds of work, right? Stevedores are dock workers.
Yes.
These would be, warehousemen.
Everything required to run a warehouse. And there's no forklifts back then. The forklift, again, is a burly Bavarian man.
So in 1919, when Nebraska Consolidated Mills starts, Jobbers Canyon is a hustle-bustle center of commerce in the American Middle West. And they start initially as a grain distributor. The company started in Grand Isle, Nebraska, but they moved to Omaha in 1922. And they distributed grain all the way through the Depression. And in 1940, in order to develop a market, like expand the market for their own grain, they started for the first time making flour, their own flour. So
a mill there.
Yeah, they were now milling their own product from their raw materials. And they continued to, they made their own flour throughout the war. And in 1951, again, looking for a market for their homemade flour or their self-made flour, they invented or developed or opened the business Duncan Hines. Duncan Hines, which made pre-made cake mixes and cupcake mix and so forth that you could buy on supermarket shelves. Pretty innovative concept.
That's the first baking mix, dry baking mix?
Yeah, we're going to let's see, Duncan Hines versus Betty Crocker. Who came first? Duncan Hines.
We should probably at some point do Duncan Hines the man as an omnibus entry because he's an interesting figure in American food. And unlike Betty Crocker, he's real.
Yeah, the cake mix is an invention of the 1930s, but by the 50s, if you think about the Levittown GIs coming home to the Pillsbury home cooked cake mix thing, Duncan Hines was one of the big brands of that kind of movement. They were the add eggs brand.
Oh, I see.
And, their other cake mixes didn't have to add eggs. So the eggs gave it that extra egginess that you want in a cake.
Unless the other ones somehow had dried eggs already
They
in
had
the
some
box.
kind of dried eggs, probably.
But
Nebraska Consolidated Mills did not take advantage of their innovation in developing Duncan Hines, and they actually sold it to Procter & Gamble in 1956 to concentrate on being a jobber company. They spent they reinvested in poultry and livestock and fertilizer and pet food and catfish meal. They didn't want to be a consumer products company. They were part of this culture of Jobbers Canyon and the raw materials game. But unfortunately, they were bad at it. And we've talked about the era of commodity speculation in the U.S.
yeah, we did the cornering the onion market show.
And the problem for Nebraska Consolidated Mills, who changed their name to ConAgra in 1971, was that commodity speculation almost put them out of business. If you are in a business of moving commodities, your profit margin gets gobbled up by speculators as prices wildly fluctuate. It more often does not benefit you as the supplier. If people in Chicago are driving prices down or wildly around, because you're in an economy where every year you're left holding the bag if prices fall.
So it's like opening a restaurant today. Don't do it.
Right. Don't do it.
Margins are low.
Whatever you do,
Tight.
don't become a commodity jobber.
I don't want to be a jobber. What if I just left my life behind, just left my family, left my game show, and just became a Midwestern warehouseman?
Just out there wearing big baggy wool pants and a flat cap.
The dream, the American dream.
So in 1974, ConAgra was kind of bankrupting. There were a lot of companies were starting to move in this direction of consolidating, buying other food companies, becoming big conglomerates. And ConAgra hired a young CEO by the name of Charles Michael Harper. And Charles Michael Harper was part of this new school of ag business CEOs. And he brought ConAgra back from the brink by primarily buying other food brands, getting out of the raw materials business and getting into processed foods.
Having something to sell at the end.
That's right. He bought over 100 different food brands and brought them under the umbrella of ConAgra.
It's weird how early that starts. I mean, today it's every company's exit strategy as well. We'll get bought by this bigger company. We'll merge with our rival.
Right. But at the time,
time you'd be like, I just make powdered milk biscuits.
Yeah, we're here in Jobbers Canyon, just moving powdered biscuits around. And a guy comes in and says, we'll give you $10 million for your Banquet Frozen Foods turkey pies. And
I'd take it.
Sure.
I'm not wedded. I'm not married to the frozen turkeys, John.
And Banquet was, I think, maybe one of the first companies that ConAgra bought. And so they grew and grew. In the 90s, they bought, over the course of 5 or 6 years in the 90s, they bought $1 billion worth of other food brands.
Oh, this process continues into the 90s.
It does.
This isn't some mid-century thing.
The company grows and grows. But in the 1980s, so Mike Harper's been in charge of the company now for 10 years, and he's considered kind of a darling of the Midwest agro business.
Is he some 80s corporate raider guy?
Business. He's maybe not agro business, but agro business.
Probably a little aggro. If he's like most 80s financial guys. Is he still alive, or can we speculate on cocaine use and stuff?
No, he died in 2016, so he's fair game.
Sorry to his loving widow. And
well,
kids,
no, we're going to start besmirching him right now.
Oh, good.
In the mid 80s, by this point in time, all the decline in the foodstuffs business and the consolidations and the era of processing foods, but also the decline of American industry in general, had produced in Omaha kind of a predictable situation, which was that there wasn't a ton of industry left. People, mechanization and containerization meant that there weren't a lot of jobs for jobbers.
Unemployment rises. White people flee to the suburbs.
There's not...
The city's probably in a bad way.
The Jobbers Canyon buildings start to see, the canyon starts to feel a little desolate.
I'm looking for
Rents
a picture
fall.
of Jobbers Canyon.
There are some great pictures of Jobbers Canyon, and I recommend anyone listening to the show that's curious.
These are beautiful old buildings.
Go look at them.
Beautiful old buildings.
They're buildings that you think of as now. Those buildings, you can't look at them without thinking, "Wow, what a great apartment that would be."
I was in downtown Cincinnati not long ago, and there's some buildings that look much like this, which I assume are left over from a warehousing era on the Ohio River. And now they're turning into gentrified apartments. And
we think of them as apartments because that's largely what the ones that survive. That's largely what they become.
Yeah.
Because there's just not the same need for places you can turn a forklift around.
Well, you certainly wouldn't do it in an American dense urban core. You wouldn't be like, well, where do you put the warehouses?
Right. Right. Well, yeah, that's right. If you think
here in
Seattle,
elsewhere.
We just built one-story warehouses throughout the Kent and Renton valleys, some of the most fertile farmland in the world.
Not too late.
Just paved them over and one-story warehouses as far as the eye can see.
It's not too late to turn it into an apple orchard.
Well, what happened in Omaha was this was the era of corporate merger, and Omaha was falling on hard times, and a big part of this also was that in America by the 1980s, the railroad in general was in decline. Trucking had taken over, and there was no more passenger rail. Rail routes had become consolidated.
Interstate highways, yeah.
So Omaha was kind of hitting the skids, and then suffered a blow in terms of its status as a corporate headquarters when a company that specialized in natural gas called Internorth decided that they were going to change their names to Enron and leave Omaha for their new corporate headquarters in Houston.
Omaha dodged a bullet.
And it scared the daylights out of Omaha because they saw their corporate, all the big business.
What if Mutual of Omaha leaves?
Yeah, all the big business pulling out. And during this time, Mike Harper started to kind of threaten Omaha with the prospect of ConAgra, who had now grown to be one of the largest employers there, leaving Omaha and moving to Chicago. And they were going to do it unless Omaha ponied up.
Just like a sports team owner wanting the new stadium.
Yep.
Jeff Bezos trying to get laws changed, and then he'll deliver magic Amazon jobs.
Now, right about this time, Jobbers Canyon was declared a National Historic District because it was widely understood to be the best example of a preserved
19th century warehouse district.
Renaissance revival warehouse district. It was.
How does that work? That's a federal agency. There's a federal list.
So the National Register of Historic Buildings is a. It's very complicated because you want it to be a federal list that protects buildings from demolition.
Yeah, like the Interior Department keeps track of what you can blow up, and that's not how it is?
No. The being listed as a historic landmark does come with certain access to
Like a lounge? Is there a free lounge?
There's a lounge. There's a lounge where you get free coffee and you can wait. There are standards of rehabilitation that come with it. There's access to government programs, but in fact, there's very little to no enforcement of preservation. Right? Like you think there's a lot of sort of misconception that if your building is declared a historic landmark, you can't make additions to it or fix it up or tear it down. In most cases, that is those situations are actually like some local homeowners association or some some like, oh, you can't,
private organization.
Yeah, you can't change Thomas Jefferson's house because it has a plaque on it. But in fact, it's just a sort of a program that's mostly
for tourism.
It's mostly a suggestion. There's not a ton of government money available.
That always works when governments just kind of gently nudge corporations to do the right thing.
There are tax credits. The idea being if it's a landmark, you can maybe make it a tourist attraction. But we saw here in Seattle, not very long ago, in trying to save our beloved Showbox entertainment venue, it was declared a landmark by the Seattle City Council.
Best concert venue in town.
And that does not protect it at all, not one little bit, from being torn down. And that's true of...
what they're saying is as long as this building exists, it's a historic place. Please enjoy it now.
Yes, we are declaring it a historic location.
Greedy developers might do something else with it, but as long as it's here...
Please don't tear it down.
Sure is nice.
Well, declaring the Jobbers Canyon a historic area did not... It gave a lot of energy to preservationists, but it did not inhibit Mike Harper from threatening the city of Omaha with the departure of ConAgra if Omaha didn't acquiesce to his plan to tear down Jobbers Canyon to build a new corporate campus in the center of Omaha for ConAgra. And this was an era, as we've talked about many times, of urban renewal in the United States, where all kinds of terrible things happened to American cities in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s.
In the name of, let's make sure it doesn't turn into a den of crime, by which we mean minorities.
I mean, the urban renewal and its companion word blight were used in the service of all manner of...
Therefore, we got to build a highway through here. Therefore, we got to tear down your historic neighborhood.
And there are plenty of worse examples in the U.S. Fort Trumbull, Niagara Falls, basically all of Poletown in Detroit. Some of these things happened even more recently than Jobbers Canyon. But Jobbers Canyon was especially egregious, partly because ConAgra could have built its corporate campus with and have left Jobbers Canyon. It was just kind of
I have to
assume
downtown Omaha at the time is not chock-a-block with thriving businesses.
No, it was all just rail yards and
cheap real estate, probably.
They could have done both. And Mike Harper just didn't like Jobbers Canyon.
What?
It was just sort of ugly.
What did the dude to Jobbers Canyon, like maybe shoot his parents?
He went on, he was famously quoted at the time saying, it's just a bunch of ugly red brick buildings. And he made staying in Omaha contingent on a couple of things. One, an enormous tax break from the city of Omaha, which the city fathers, terrified that they would have another Enron on their hands.
That meant something different at the time.
Immediately fell over themselves to pass a tax bill that gave ConAgra preferential treatment. And then in the spirit, and this was a kind of collective spirit in the town, Mike Harper wasn't fighting all of the city boosters.
Because they were like, bring something modern to Jobbers Canyon.
Exactly. Like the mayor and the city council and it was only the disagreeable, NIMBY marchers that tried to get this neighborhood protected. And they were just they took it to court. Basically their case was steamrolled. And in 1989, all of Jobbers Canyon was demolished, with the exception of one building. But the whole of the neighborhood flattened and replaced with a fake lake with a park around it and some low-slung, fairly ugly red brick buildings.
One-story office buildings. How ugly is it? Let me look.
Well, I'll give you a sense. It depends on what you think is ugly, but what they ended up calling it was the Heartland of America Park at the riverfront. Every one of these words capitalized, right? Heartland of America Park at the riverfront. And the idea being that, it was going to revitalize the downtown by building a
big outdoor public space.
Public space with a it's a 1 mile loop around the park. There was another park connected to it called the Gene Lee Mall, which was named after the mayor. It had 3 fountains in the lake. One of them had the fountains were connected to a light show and a music show. So, they could, at night, the fountains would shoot off and there'd be...
Like our Seattle Center fountain.
It's
the Omaha Bellagio.
That's right.
Well, maybe this is nice. I don't know. I mean, it's a public space now.
It was.
Is it well used?
Although, other attempts to rehabilitate downtown Omaha kind of met with mixed success. In 2002, ConAgra, who was still in the commodities business to the extent that they were still selling fresh meat, like ground beef and so forth, they had an E. coli tragedy in their ground beef. And in 2002...
E. coli?
E. coli.
Instead of E. coli? Yeah, you said it like
E. coli. They ended up selling off their fresh meat business in 2002. In 2006, they sold off their frozen meat business.
I wouldn't buy any E. coli laden frozen meat business. I'd be like, first you fix your E. coli problem, then maybe I'll buy your frozen meat business.
Then, of course, they had a Slim Jim explosion at some point in there.
Right.
At a certain point, having redeveloped all of downtown Omaha, in 2015, Mike Harper decided that they were going to leave Omaha anyway and move their corporate headquarters to Chicago.
Wow.
And moved their corporate headquarters in Chicago to a building called the Merchandise Mart, which is effectively the world's biggest...
I know where that is.
...version of Jobbers Canyon.
It's a stop on the L.
Yeah. It's built in... It's basically a Jobbers Canyon, except mega-sized. All of Jobbers Canyon together had 1.7 million square feet of warehouse space. Merchandise Mart has 4 million square feet of space. It was built in the same style, like everything in one place. But it also was showrooms of different companies where you could show off your wares. At one point, the Sultan of Brunei went to Merchandise Mart and furnished his entire palace just from things at Merchandise Mart because he said, there's only one place in the world that you could get everything, and it's here. Beautiful Merchandise
Mart. Yeah, it's where you go to look at wallpaper samples and furniture and stuff. It must be a little newer than the Jobbers Canyon stuff because it's not Renaissance Revival.
It was built in 1930.
Yeah, it's kind of deco.
Yeah. But still built in at the tail end of that style.
Let's build massive warehouse-like buildings.
Merchandise Mart, weirdly, is a big part of the Kennedy fortune.
Really?
Joe Kennedy bought Merchandise Mart in the, kind of for pennies on the dollar during the Depression, and it ended up being a source of the Kennedy wealth all through their political era. It's, the money from Merchandise Mart is what funded the JFK campaign.
JFK's crooked win in 1960.
and its connection to Daley's Chicago and like they were. I always wondered how the Kennedys were mobbed up with the Chicago Democratic Party, but that's why.
It was Merchandise Mart.
It was Merchandise Mart.
They owned a bunch of furniture showrooms.
So in the end, all of that work on the part of Omaha to keep ConAgra
Save those jobs
ended up being for naught. The ConAgra campus now, still partly owned by ConAgra, but a much downscaled set of employees. They didn't keep the jobs, in other words.
Yeah.
Part of the park is fenced off. They're trying to fix it and make it,
even the park now is a little dated. And
yeah. Well, and by all accounts, like the park very quickly slid into a state of kind of graffiti, unsafe feeling,
urban blight.
If you replace the blight with the blight. But what's amazing is that in downtown Omaha, there was then a redevelopment of the remaining warehouse buildings from that era called the Old Market redevelopment, which has become...
What do they do with it? Is it residential or is it a tourist attraction?
Residential,
food
restaurants.
Yeah.
It's a vibrant, like old middle of downtown community that's a major tourist destination for all of the Midwest.
And they could have had blocks of it.
People love it down there. And they could have, it's hard to know. You definitely would have had a period of a couple of decades of the Jobbers Canyon being just kind of abandoned.
Before the pendulum turned on American cities.
But if you think about like what it represented in terms of like the wealth intrinsic to that kind of built environment,
yeah, and
the wealth that goes along with the history of and a sense of place, and you look at in the moment, it makes sense. Oh, let's tear down this old garbage and build what looks like a sanatorium in its place. But now we're living in a place where the sanatorium itself is dated and
a weird relic,
unusable. And you think, oh wow, we really think of what a Jobbers Canyon Omaha would be.
We could have had a canyon here,
and we could have had this dumb hospital. I mean, it didn't have to get torn down.
If you're a city and some company comes to you basically with the little extortion gun in their pocket, heed the warning of Jobbers Canyon. They're just like the blackmailer that's going to keep hitting you up every 9 months.
It still happens all the time.
Don't do what they say.
Historic buildings torn down and replaced with parking lots.
You've got a city to run. Don't let Bezos tell you, well, not Bezos. Don't let whoever.
Don't let Elon Musk.
Don't let Elon Musk tear down your beautiful, beautiful Renaissance Revival warehouses. Please, I'm begging you. And that concludes Jobbers Canyon. Entry 673.LK1218. Certificate number 48481. In the omnibus. As we leave you today, a quick reminder that you could find Omnibus at Omnibus Project on social media. I'm at Ken Jennings. John is at John Roderick, but he really shouldn't be there. He should be making more healthful home-cooked meals and not hitting refresh on something while he shovels Trader Joe's tikka masala into his mouth.
That's right.
Getting most of it in his beard.
That's right.
You could email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You should certainly look for others who enjoy the show, enjoying the discussion by finding the futurelings online. You could send us physical items. If you have relics of Omaha as it was, send them to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155. That's our little warehouse district right there.
Mm-hmm. And we're the jobbers.
And most importantly, I want you to get up. I want you to get up and go to the window, open the window and lean out and say, I'm going to give to the Omnibus Patreon. I've been getting this for free and I'm not going to mooch anymore. You can support the show at patreon.com/omnibusproject and enjoy all the amazing perks and contents that come with it. There's a free lounge. There's a lounge with with coffee until 11 a.m.
I should say that it was not Mike Harper who moved.
Yeah, because you said he had died around then.
Yeah, it was
On his deathbed, was he like, leave Omaha?
no. He built that whole campus in Omaha and then retired. It was
Subsequent caretaker executives.
Caretaker executives who felt no obligation to adhere to the implicit promise that ConAgra would stay there forever, having been given all this corporate grift.
That's why you get a lawyer. It doesn't matter if the guy you're shaking hands with is nice. He's gonna be in Cabo in 2.5 years. He's gonna take some kind of a package and leave. Then you're dealing with his even more shark-like successors.
Pretty dumb that the city council of Omaha, Nebraska didn't have it written into the contract that you have to stay. I mean, it's the Boeing problem too. We have it here.
It's a free speech violation, man. Corporations need to be able to do whatever they want at all times. It's in the Constitution.
That's right. Because God bless America.
God bless America.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, sitting here on a pile of frozen food containers, we have no idea how long our civilization survived, but it can't possibly survive that long with how cheap this tikka masala is. We have no.
That can't even be real chicken.
No, it is.
That's some kind
delicious chicken.
That's some weird 8-legged, 8-breasted chicken that Trader Joe's knows how to breed.
This was a chicken named Sally, and she lived a full and rewarding life.
Yeah, Costco should start putting the names on the rotisserie chickens.
They're all named Sally.
Oh, well, that's easy to remember.
We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come, but if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the office.